Hey everyone, I'm Cindy Lou Barlow, and welcome to another episode of Cool Casts, where I interview very cool people doing super cool things. And today, I can't even tell you how excited I am to have one of the people who has influenced my life in so many ways and has helped me to grow in so many ways. Her name is Katherine Metz, and she is a Feng Shui consultant. She is a mentor. She was my mentor for many years, a teacher and a seeker. And also, she would describe herself as someone who is a seer. She sees she sees what other people do not see. And today I'm looking forward to seeing what she sees in her own life and also maybe in the world as well. So, Katherine Metz, welcome.
Thanks, Cindy. It's good to see you. It's been a while. So thanks
It
for having me.
has. Katherine
Yeah.
and I, we've been to a number of places together. We went to Taiwan together with Professor Lynn Young, who was we'll talk a little bit about him, but he was the master that we both learned from, and Katherine learned from him, and then I learned from Katherine, and we went to Taiwan, and what a trip that was.
Yeah. I'll never forget that trip where we all sat in front of the fence at one place that was in Chinese, and we all just gathered at that fence and sat on it. And someone came by and said, "Do you realize that sign says poisonous snakes here?" I don't know if you remember that, but
Well, we had two buses, those who were English speaking and those who were Chinese speaking. And we were just very clueless, weren't we?
yes. We were, and it was our Chinese friends who helped us out for sure.
They were great. Well, and what I remember about that trip was that everywhere we went, Professor was so popular. Remember all the cheerleaders that would come out and dance for him, and the mayor would come out, and we would stay at these amazing places. They were just amazing.
It was incredible to see all the press that came to greet him, and then he was on the evening news, and the newspapers came and they interviewed him, and he asked me a question once. He said, "Oh, Katherine, you know palmistry, read my palm for them." I was like, so he was a teacher who really brought us out of our comfort zone, I think, a lot.
Yeah.
And asked things of us that we wouldn't otherwise have experienced.
Yeah.
And that was really wonderful, because I think now what we see in our work is that we have to be ready for whatever comes to our door. And he really schooled us in that, I think.
Yeah. What I want to do is I want to take you back to the beginning because there's part of your story that I've heard and some I know I haven't heard yet. And you studied, so let's talk first about who Professor Lin Young is. Do you want to just give a brief description of him and how you
Oh gosh, he's a gentleman, first of all, I think. He's a scholar. I mean, he has a number of degrees, in urban planning, and he studied from the age of 6. He lived with monks, and so he has this deep wisdom that he carries with him, from being a child in that environment. And he's a man who sees through, who sees into, and who is, I think, was always dedicated to all of us, that he knew we were the ones who could bring this to a new place. And so he placed so much trust in us, and he gave us so graciously all this information and wisdom that he had garnered from his lifetime. And so
and he
he's
was
a
born in
man.
Taiwan. Is that right?
Yes, his family's from Taiwan, and then he went to China, and there he lived for uh, I, I, his young years in a monastery there, and learned so much, and then went back to Taiwan. Yeah, and then came here in the later years. So we were so lucky that he chose this place, and he was just, a couple miles from me,
So
and
how did
that
you first meet? And what's his full name? Give us his full name. It's Thomas.
His Holiness Grand Master Professor Lin Yun Rinpoche.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny because hold on, I'm going to just put my earphone in so I can hear you just a little bit better. My heat comes on every now and again, and
Mine's doing the same thing.
yeah, and I know I can't. I know that I can still be heard, hear you. So that's a little bit better. So, where did you live? How did you meet him? What was the story with you two?
I lived in San Mateo, California, um, and he lived just up the hill. His first temple here was just up the hill on Highway 580, just a couple miles up the hill from me. And that's where he now it rests, just up the hill from there. So I
Is that
feel
is
at
that the one that
home.
we've been to? Is that the one that they still have up on that on the one that we painted, the steps, and
No,
it's a
no,
different one? Okay,
that's in Berkeley.
in
That's
Berkeley. Okay.
the big temple was in Berkeley. Yeah. So this is on the other side of the bay. Um, and so I met him. Um, Actually, it's a funny story. I was helping out a friend who was opening her dental practice, and one day she just put a postcard on my desk that she had received about feng shui. But it was about a Hawaiian kahuna. And so I went to Hawaii. She said, I think this is for you. And I think you should go, right out of the blue. And I actually went, and I lived on the beach with a number of women and a kahuna, and I learned so much. Um, but I knew that gentleman was not my teacher.
Mm.
So I came back, and someone else said, you should meet Professor Lynn. And so I went to a class there in San Francisco, where he was teaching. And I knew immediately that day that I was meant to chronicle everything he ever said. I mean, it was instantaneous. And that's what I did for the entire 25 years then until he passed away. So you remember me in Taiwan, I was always writing down on
Every
napkins.
workshop we had, you were you were writing. It was like, this is my job. I have to make sure and write everything you said. And it
Yeah,
wasn't easy because it was usually translated from
yeah,
Chinese.
yeah. So I did the best I could. I've now completed that archive, which feels really good. I mean, I've taken this pause that we all have during the pandemic and completed that. I imagine there are a few little pieces that I'll still be adding, but that all shows up now in the Feng Shui storyboard. So that's everything I learned from him, and it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages. So I was really lucky.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think that you got in with him at a really very interesting time when his health was still pretty good,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
he was probably at his prime at that time.
Yes. I was really lucky to have seen all of that, and to experience the ways in which he changed and approached life. Because at the end of his life, he really began to give us some secrets that he hadn't given before. I mean, he knew it was time, and he was so gracious in passing on things that were precious. I think the most precious things for him, and he passed those on to us before he passed away. And that was a beautiful time with him. It was really special.
Yeah, you know, your relationship with him, because he had a lot of students all over the world, and they were all from different backgrounds. But I believe that there was a relationship between you and him that was one of the more special relationships. In fact, I remember those last few times when he was with us, when we were in Berkeley, and there were things that he said specifically to you, and so I know that you know, I don't think he was kind of a person that just handed a lot of lineage down with people, but we all really got like uh, in terms of his American students, you had a very very special place in his heart. I want you, if you would, because there were some times in your life that were very very hard, um, and you know, I know a little bit of this story, but I want you, if you feel that you can, talk about what happened when you were diagnosed with cancer, and how you dealt with that, and what professor said to you at that time, if you feel comfortable, talking about that.
Um, yeah, that's a hard one because I knew well, I learned about that I had cancer using a technique that he had taught us, which was the astral body meditation, where you leave your body and you're standing outside of yourself in a sense, and you're looking back. And I could see um, that tiny bit of cancer there. And so that was the beginning of a journey of like, we can really see this. Like, am I really seeing this? How can this be true? But I immediately went to professor and asked for his guidance, because somehow internally I just knew that I wasn't to do chemotherapy. And certainly that's everyone's choice. Um, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but financially I couldn't do it then. I wasn't able to even afford it. There was this gap in my insurance, so I knew I had to try something, first, because I had children to take care of, and um, I couldn't just spend all my money. It was a difficult time, and I went to him over periods of time and just received his chi transfusions. you know Instead of an infusion of chemicals, I got this spiritual infusion. And he would call me up in the middle of the night and he would say, I'm here, I'm awake. It might be 2 a.m. Can you come across the bay and just sit with me?
That's so him, because he was always up at night, wasn't
Yes, yes. So that was an incredible moment, and some of those transfusions happened at that time. But then we would sit with floor plans, and I would just be asking him, how do we put the bug on this floor plan? I don't understand this one. I got that direct knowledge right from him, and that was so. It was this incredible mixture of access to him that was so kind of him, getting those chi transfusions and just having this wisdom sort of poured forth from him. Um, and I sort of remember one of the last times that I saw him before he passed away is he was in a wheelchair at that time, and he was being sort of pushed down the aisle of one of our classes. I think it was in New York. Um, and I was standing there just standing up as we did when he all came in, and he just took my hand and he wouldn't let go, and I was sort of dragged down the aisle. you know and he just said at that time, keep teaching.
Yeah.
So he let us all know, I think he let every one of us know um, what was needed of us. I think in his own way he did that with everyone. It wasn't just me. um, he gave those messages to each one of us, and that was so clear to me as I watched him interact with people. He had that charisma and that heart and that ability to just offer whatever was in front of, offer what was needed at any time.
You know, he had a way of seeing people. There was one time when they were here in Boston. Remember, we used to have all the workshops here in Boston, and I had a boyfriend at the time that was really not not a right fit at all. And after the workshop, we get to take blessings and get chi transfusions and things. So we're in line, and I invited him to come. I said, you can come, and when we both like knelt down at Professor, like I remember the look on his face. He went like, and I'm thinking he sees it, but then he went kind of like, I gave us, and it was just so funny. And the thing is that's not, in my experience with him, he wasn't one to make those kind. You could. He was just so compassionate that he wasn't one to make any kind of judgment. But it was just like really stark. You know what I'm saying?
I know when he had something to say, he said it, but he was always very discerning and careful
So,
the way
yeah.
he said it. And that's something I learned from him, was to really listen, to really see, and then know how to respond. I mean, to adjust our own chi so that we can respond in the moment in the perfect way. I mean, we have to do that every day when we work with our clients. I mean, we have to do that every day in our life.
Yeah.
And he really taught us that quality of earth that can just become that chameleon, who becomes whatever's needed in that moment. And he was so good at that. And it was delightful. And do you remember the times when people would stand up in front of class and he'd do a lineup of people, and when we were reading chi, of people learning to read chi, and they'd all stand up there, and then he'd take a look for a few seconds even, and then he'd turn around and face us, and he'd talk about the people behind him, and he would know each one of them in seconds. It was, and when I watched the mastery of that, I thought, oh gosh, I hope I come back many lifetimes so that I can have that mastery.
Yeah.
um, it was beautiful to watch and funny. He's
And
funny.
funny. He was very funny. He was always making us laugh.
Yeah,
It really was. It was never boring. Even though these were like long sessions where you say something and somebody's translated it, and the room is crowded, knee to knee. People have their notebooks, and it was. I remember one story about him that I always felt was really just said a lot about how he was in public. Maybe you remember this story. He was talking about, because he was so popular in Taiwan, and everybody, all of the different political parties wanted him on his side,
yeah,
and so they would interview him and make it look like, he was with them, and then they, would go back and forth. And he was very uncomfortable because he was a very neutral person,
yeah.
and and he tells the story where they're asking him a question. They wanted to, him to take a side or to say something. He said, I didn't know what to say, so I just started singing. Do you remember that story? And I was just like, perfect, he just starts singing his song.
I know he was great at that. I do remember him saying too that when they were asking for cures for a gentleman who was a politician. It was about his swimming pool underneath his house or something, and professor said, "Is this gentleman a politician or a statesman?" And I
Oh,
thought, now that's interesting. And
yeah.
he said the answer might be different if it's a politician. If it's a statement, here's what to do. But then he very graciously walked that back, and he said, but I would still give this to the politician. But he made that distinction in a very
Yeah.
interesting way.
Yeah.
And that's so much with us today.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So he was teaching us um, a way of looking at the world and a way of looking at people. Very, but with the same kind of compassion as that you would give that.
yes,
You mentioned just a few minutes ago looking at people's chi. So let's start off just with the word chi, because some people might have heard that word before, but they don't know exactly what it is. So what is chi? Just
oh gosh, this is such a hard definition. I mean,
it
it's so
is.
simple, and yet it's
Mm.
um I don't know that I have the words because it changes all the time. Because I've been studying faces lately. You and I have very much the same face shape. That's interesting.
Wow.
Um,
I'm very flattered.
I, um,
I think we both have a lot of metal in us too, right?
yeah, metal and earth and
Yeah.
wood. I mean, it's all there. But when we're looking at someone's essence, that's their chi. And it can show in our hands, it can show in our face, it can show in our gestures, you know but it's our essence, it's who we are, and it does leave us when we die. Our chi, what professor would say, becomes the ling particle, right?
Right.
So um so when it's out of the body, it's a ling particle, and when it's in the body, it's chi. And it's what animates us. It's what gives us our ability to speak eloquently, or it might be that we have the ability to speak with real bluntness that gets people to really wake up and, you know, pay attention.
Right, right.
It's our chi, and it has to be flexible.
Mhm.
You know, if we always had wood chi and very upright and demanding, and that in the air, and we came into the world like that, and never could act in another way, we wouldn't get very far. We need that flexibility of our chi to become water or wood. Or, yeah.
So let's just go down. There are five different elements. So you started off with wood. So what is a wood personality like? You started off a little
Um,
bit, but describe it a little bit more.
yeah, very upright, very intellectual, very first, best, and always kind of attitude, always pushing through like a small plant through the sidewalk. You know, that kind of power,
Hmm.
that kind of. But wood can also, you know, branches out into a tree, right?
Right.
So you can have a wood person who's here and there, and you can never find them because they're traveling the world and they have lots of different things to do, and they have piles of projects on their desk, and they move fast and they move quick. And if you can't keep up with them, they might not want to hang around with you. That's the wood person.
so so for advice, for love advice for people dating wood.
I just did an Instagram post on that that's coming up in February. Yeah, you know, and that wood keeps the fire personality. So the fire burns brightly because it's burning up the wood, right? So if you fire person is charismatic, can take over a room just by standing there. It's like a red rose in the center of a room that just dominates the room. Very charismatic. Um, very can be very fiery. That movement of wood that's so fast can create some anger, and that can turn into rage and fire. So you get this raging fire, but fire's kind of full of like you could see it in Lady Gaga in the inauguration, right? I mean, even her face was the fire shape, the diamond, fire and wood shape, um, and she sang about fireworks. You know, she sang fireworks. Um, that person is just bright and shiny, but they can burn themselves out and turn into ash. So, you know, we see some of our um, actors and actresses burn themselves out, even playing a role, and they turn to ash. And or the wood and the fire can both go to substance abuse, because all that bright, shiny just dies.
So it's like exertion and then exhaustion.
Yeah, yeah. Wood sort of um, pull the covers up, stay home and pull the covers up when they instead of traveling all over, and fire just sort of dies. You know,
So what you're
metaphor.
saying is that there's like yin and yang. There's like a part that when it's like so some part is out of control and that's too much, and then there's also another part where it's very suppressed, and then
Yeah,
that doesn't get
yeah,
to
and
live
it's
out.
the
Yeah.
balance we're trying to. It's the balance we're
You're
trying
trying
to.
to find a balance with it,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
now we have wood, we have fire. You want to go to earth?
Earth.
Okay.
Yeah, look at Earth. Um, Earth is that Earth Mother, you know, the one who gathers you into her kitchen and feeds you and takes care of you, and her closets are full, so she has blankets for you and she has food for you, and she, in at her best, um, will give whatever is needed.
Mm,
At their worst, they give themselves away,
right.
right?
Yeah.
So another part of being worst is they give advice when it's not asked for,
Mm,
and then they get very disappointed that people don't want them around or people don't want to take that advice. That's another really difficult part of wood. We've just watched Earth totally out of balance
mm,
in our former president,
mm,
um, because it turns into self-complaint,
mhm,
which we heard often, it can turn into greed and being just so self-centered and stuck there and not being able to change. Stuck. You have your feet stuck in the mud. But earth at its best is just welcoming and wholesome and generous, and is that place of transition. It allows things to change from one thing to another, um, with grace and ease without being changed internally. An earth person can make this change happen without losing themselves because they're grounded.
Yeah. 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 And then, and then you said the other side is by giving too much. What does that look like when an earth person is out of balance in that way?
Oh, and I as women we're really familiar with this. We give to our children, um, we give to our work, we give to community. We give until there's nothing left, and that's the way it shows up is complaint, self-complaint. You're not listening to me. I've given you everything. How could you? That kind of thing. It also shows up as feeling kind of um, well, stuck is another word. What was the one I'm looking for? Um, I've forgotten the other word I was thinking of. It might come back to me. You just, there's
Stagnant?
nothing left.
You're
Yeah.
not talking about stagnation because that would maybe be more water.
Well, I guess both could stagnate. One would stagnate, just stuck, and the other would kind of, yeah. Both, I think they apply in different ways to water as well. But wood can get really stuck in an opinion.
Right.
Um, I just saw that on a face of one politician with a very earth face and very earth hands. And just actually, this was with a prosecutor prosecuting a murder case in the South. And the accused was a Black man. And he was tried 6 times. And each time there was, it was thrown out, but because of malfeasance of the prosecutor, but they prosecuted again, and then they prosecuted again, and the man was in jail for 33 years. And finally, the 7th time, they let it go, and he's out of jail. And he actually didn't do it, but the prosecutor, this is this square face, square hands. Everything about him was earth. And I just thought, did he get caught in this Southern racism? I mean, the culture, did he just get stuck there because of an upbringing in that culture? And he couldn't move out of that. It wasn't, I couldn't see it in his face. I couldn't see it in any other features. For him to be able to move out of that, especially if he grew up as a child with that.
Right.
So that was, and I think all this information now in my life is leading me toward how do we use this in terms of justice? And that's the question I'm asking myself a lot right now.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that yet, Cindy.
Yeah.
But as I see it play out in everything I'm seeing in politics, because I've been paying such close attention in this last year, I have never been so interested in politics as I have been this year, and what I can learn from the 5 elements. And there's a lot of wood in our politicians. We live in a wood country, first, best, and
right. Yeah.
And I see a lot of
I'd
that.
imagine that in a way, free trade and capitalism is somewhat wood, right?
Yeah.
Make things grow really fast.
Yeah. And I see it in the faces of
and we also in a fire culture because Hollywood is pretty, fame,
yeah,
and those two things go together a lot.
Yeah, wood and fire. We see it a lot in our reality TV shows, because we see these shows like when The Apprentice became the Celebrity Apprentice, you added that fire of celebrity to this competition of wood, and that show just blew up in anger and fights. over time. I mean, it was really interesting to see that. The same thing's happening now in The Bachelor. And I watch these shows because I'm watching the chief.
Because the Bachelor is now Celebrity Bachelor. Is it?
No, it's just that they're adding more and more content that has women fighting with one another. I mean, this past week they had women boxing. I mean, it was really. I want to write a letter to them, but I think it's because it's because they want more conflict.
Yeah.
I mean, that's that fire exploding, right? And that's what we're watching. And so as they add more and more of that, these shows are becoming more and more of that. And it seems that the populace is asking for more and more of that. And I'm just going, how do we change that? How do we change that?
Well, one thing about we know that about the five elements is that you can balance the elements out with other elements. So
Right.
we have the earth. Let's go on to water.
Metal.
Oh, we're going to go metal first.
Let's go metal. Yeah. Let's go in the constructive cycle.
Okay,
metal. Well, you and I know metal. But metal, I think a really good example now of watching metal. Well, first of all, was Amanda Gorin at the inauguration. First of all, she was a total balance of all of the elements. For her to overcome her speech impediment and to deliver this beautiful, flowing, articulate, graceful poetry, she had to have a container to put that in. She had to write for years in order to get to that place. And her container was her writing. So I saw her medal there, but she had to have all five. But I think the other medal that you can see right now is our new press secretary. And everyone can see her on TV every day. Her name is Jen Psaki. And you watch her gestures, they're very beautiful and contained, which is and graceful like wood. Her speech is very articulate, which is metal. And her fire comes in her red hair and her freckles, and her kindness, well, that's also wood. Her kindness and her generosity of spirit is wood. And she is earth because she can adapt to anyone asking any question. She's very adaptable, like an earth person can be. And she flows, her conversation flows. And even in moving from one person to another, she flows. So all the five elements are there, but her metal is very precise. Her metal is very articulate. Her metal.
What metal looks like? Give us an idea of what
Yeah, metal is ethical. Metal is graceful. Metal is articulate speech. In all its goodness, metal is asks each one of us to be our best. Metal asks of us to be ethical, to be truthful, to find our right place, to take right action. That's the beauty of metal. It shines in that way, and it encourages us all to be our best. Metal at its worst becomes like a knife and can cut you into pieces just with a stare.
Like one of your teachers in junior high or something, right?
Yeah, right. But with their words, they can speak very softly, but cut you into a million little pieces. They're very like a military officer, all puffed up. That's the worst of metal, truly. But I think people miss that beautiful, gracious side of metal, and we can see it right in front of us every day if we watch some of those press conferences. And I love to give examples where people can go out and see for themselves.
So would a metal person be organized?
Yes, yes, she's and this press secretary is very organized, and beautifully so. That's an interesting story too, because I watched, I was sitting in the back. I was going to give a presentation the next day for a group of people, and I got to be there the night before. And I watched the presentation of this very beautiful metal person, all organized, talk about clutter. And she had everything all lined up and all these beautiful things to hand out. And the people sitting behind me was a row of earth people. These people who can't really who have clutter because they want to give everything to everybody, and they want to have everything on hand. So their closets are stuffed and their refrigerators stuffed and there's things everywhere just in case, right? And the metal people behind me were crying. And afterwards I said, what's going on? And they said, we could not possibly relate to her. We can't relate to her. She's too perfect and we're not that. Can you give us a way to relate to our clutter that's different? So that's a whole new conversation. So I did a whole a class on that.
Wow.
Clutter, which is available actually in my library of audios. According to the 5 elements, what kind of
That is
clutter?
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
that is really awesome.
I mean,
Because
if you,
we do see people that, we think are too perfect. I mean, that's the part of being part of humanity, is to see that everybody isn't the same, and they can't do things in the same way. And so certainly I'm sure when you teach people, you do look at their chi, and you do look at their elements, and you would speak to them probably differently. Would you is that one of the ways?
oh yeah, I mean, I worked with an architect from Italy on Skype yesterday, I think it was. And it had been a very long process, a lot of architects on this project. And she was finally hired. And um, I wanted it finished because the client was really at risk from a really abusive uh, husband. Um, and so I wanted this settled because he was getting more and more agitated. And I knew I had to get through to this new architect. I saw her face on Skype and it was wood and fire. I
Mm,
was like, okay, she's going to hear me clearly. She's going to move quickly. She's going to get this done. And she's going to do it with heart and compassion for this, our client who's struggling. And in 30 minutes, the new thing was all done. I got to watch her on AutoCAD. I knew from her face that I could
to give it
do
to her that way.
and get it done and get it done with heart. And it turned out beautifully after months. And so the minute I saw her face, I knew. And she was talking like this and her hands and speaking in Italian, and I just knew it could happen. And so I'm always watching for that because I want to match that. I mean, if I had brought water along, which water is that person who thinks and who thinks it over and over again, who moves kind of slowly because they want to get it right, and they want to, they give a lot of thought to things, and a lot of wisdom comes from that, right? If I had slowed her down um, and said, well, we have to do this because of this, and here's what we're trying to do. And if I did too much of that, I would drive her crazy. Right?
I know I have some wood clients, and it's like, do not give me the details, just
Yes.
just the facts. They have no need for them, So
Right.
yeah,
But you might come across someone who, you ask them to move a chair and they want to know all the deep reasons why you should move that chair. And other people, like, is going to get up and move the chair. You know,
exactly.
so that's why we create teams. All of my teams that I created when I was teaching in Los Angeles, and I did classes in my own home, I made sure the team that I had with me had all 5 elements, and it really showed up in great stories. But teams need that balance.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah.
and that's what I saw in the water of Amanda Gorn, the woman who did the poetry, the young woman. One of the things about water is water can see what is, and they can see what is the ideal or what needs to be. And she did that in every word she spoke. She stated what is and she stated what needs to be. So that was where we saw her water. But just in her yellow coat and her red hairpiece, you could see the earth and the fire. And a Chinese person said to me, that's a matchstick. Look, she lit up the entire world.
Yeah.
So I saw the elements there. It was perfect. It was perfect.
Is water also? Because I'd always thought that, and I could be wrong on this one, but the water's fairly independent thinking.
Yes, water is the person who needs a room of their own.
Yeah.
So as Feng Shui practitioners, we need to give them that place. Because they need to be ensconced in some way. But that's where it's difficult for water, because if they're ensconced in this tower and writing and thinking, then nothing ever happens. So they need wood, because water feeds wood. So they need a wood person to take that manuscript or to take that idea and put it into the world. Water people aren't so good at that. Very wise, and they can see things, but they need people to get them moving. Yeah.
So you're already starting to talk about how each of these elements help each other. So we're talking about how water feeds the wood element, and you said the wood element feeds the fire element.
Right.
So the fire element, what does the fire element do for? I mean, the wood element do for fire?
Wood's the fuel. I mean, the fire, you'll see that even in our, the trigrams of the I Ching. You have these two yang lines on the outside, and you have this broken line on the inside. So you have yang, yin, yang. This is the wood. That dark line in the middle is the wood that feeds the fire and the illumination on both sides. So if anyone is not familiar with the Bagua or the lines that are on the Bagua, they're lines and broken lines, they're all speaking to the elements.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So so let's just look at it then in the world. So somebody writes a script, a water person writes a script. The wood person takes that script.
Yes.
And auditions a fire person.
Yes. Right. And
all right, so let's take it all around to the earth, and
yeah, and the earth person is the person who puts all, sort of is the transition and getting it. It's the transition, putting that all together, bundling it all up in a sense, so that the metal person can refine all of it, right? And then it pops into it's refined and it's ready to go, and then it drops
edited.
into water, yeah, edited, yes, edited, and polished up, right? So yeah, and then it might come back to water for a review, right? Someone reviewing all of that, and then the wood takes it again, right? So.
Yeah, so that was an interesting analogy. So let's look at it just the opposite. So what if it goes the other direction, from water to metal?
Okay, so you have say you have fire will melt metal, right? So you and I, who carry metal in a fairly strong way, someone might we might be threatened by someone else's fiery words, right? Because it could melt us. But that water person might be able to put out that fire.
Yeah, that's very true.
My
son is fire. My son is fire, and I'm always having to already got me again. Like, yeah, I'm melting. You get me, right?
Yeah, I get you. Yes. I remember one day when Professor said to me, "Are you crazy?" And I was just like, "Oh." I had said something. I was in a Boston class where I asked him, about somebody being able to see sound and hear color, and
that question, I think.
Remember that?
I do, because he was like.
He just looked at me like I was crazy. So I spoke with him afterwards, maybe a year later, and he said, that's something to think about. And he really took it in. So he was able to listen, but I think in that moment, maybe he just said that because it was the wrong time in class or something, but it was like I was melted at that moment. But it didn't take long to get past it.
What would you say, Professor was in his element, in his like primary element, because he could dance around them all. I would imagine, but
Yeah, you know, it's so funny because I've never analyzed that. I've never even thought about it.
really,
Someone asked me the other day, we've been studying faces, and someone asked me the other day what his face is, and I went, I've never thought about that.
mm,
It's so interesting. So I haven't thought about that because I think um, he always gave us what we needed, and
mm,
so it never felt like it was all earth or all water or all
yeah,
metal. He had what's the word I want? He had the capability to use every one of them well.
yeah, that's true.
So I don't know that I ever saw through to the essence. Um, I guess I would have to say that because maybe his essence was just his heart,
Mm,
you know, his wisdom heart,
mhm,
right? Because heart and mind is one word in Chinese.
right.
Um, so I think his heart and his mind just became what I saw all the time.
Mm.
That was a good question. I really never thought about it.
Well, I'd like to go back to, well, I'd like to pick up with this in just a minute, but I really would like to go back to your relationship with Professor, in terms of there were lots of things that he taught you to do when you were in some pretty tough places, and some of them really worked well. And I think one of the things that you and I both talked about is that it's really easy in a world that you can just take a pill, and and we're just looking for a cure in a pill, but you really had to cure yourself through meditation and through some deep practices.
Yeah.
How what were some of the things that you did, and how did that change you, and how is that in some way in your life path? I don't want to say defined you, because I don't really like that idea that we're just defining ourselves all the time, but that that it melded something in you to create the being that you are, and it's very wise woman at this point.
Um, well, I think first of all, being able to step outside myself and look back and seeing, you know, a danger to myself was eye-opening. Um, and then um, he asked if I knew all the Supreme Yoga meditations, and I did. I mean, it took him, I think, 10 years to teach us the all 9 Supreme Yoga meditations, and now people get them all together at one
Yeah,
time. It took us a long time.
yeah,
But I had all 9 of them, and he said, I'd like you to practice them as often as possible. And I practiced all 9, 9 times a day for about a year. Now, you know those meditations, they're they're not
no
easy.
joke. Yeah, they're no joke.
It was like I did all day, you know, doing the 9 Supreme Yoga meditations, you know, from 1 to 9 and then 1 to 9 and 1 to 9, 9 times. And it was a great part of my day for about a year. And I think I learned then that life is so much more than we can see. Um, I began to feel the differences. I began to feel more calm. I began to draw more helpful people to me. Things just changed in many ways. Um, there were difficult stretches of time in there, but I was beginning to see small things. I was beginning to see my inspiration evolve. I was beginning to see more, to see through more things, to see under more things, to see more clearly, to respond more gently. You know, I think my metal element really, I began to see I needed to honor that, and I needed to bring up my fire as well. Um, I sort of lost my fire in the first year that I was alive. Um, um, so I think I learned to just calm down and to trust and to deal with the difficulties that whole situation presented. Um, and I learned to use things like one of the things that we used to do with the people around me at that time when I was really sick. Um, we have a method where you see your hair standing up straight like that. And it's very funny. And we'd all do that. And then we'd all laugh, and we'd be laughing on the floor, rolling around on the floor. And so there were methods that made me laugh. There were methods that took a long time and were very time consuming, but I could feel a change. And I don't even know that I knew the words at that time. But as I look back, it just, remember the circle professor used to talk about that everything that's known is inside the circle and everything that's unknown is outside the circle. And this area is so much bigger than this. I began to really see through that barrier and to see what's out here. And so that just got me more interested in allowing that information to flow from me to other people in order to help. And first of all, at that moment, it was to help myself. But I learned that I just began to see all of this, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger. All the ways we can take care of ourselves and help other people. And so now I'm looking at what's out here in terms of justice. It's just a new thought for me. I don't know the answer yet.
One of the things I hear in that, and I want to ask you, because you told me about this once, but that you had the power to heal yourself, that you experienced the power of your own self-healing. And I remember once you told me that as you were going through this process and you were, I think, physically in pain, that it was really hard to be in physical pain, but then you also said that at least as long as you were in pain, you knew you were still alive. Do you remember?
I don't remember saying that.
It had quite an impact on me because I thought, wow, it's really brave when you're going through something and it's life and death, and
yeah, I don't remember saying that. But if it's been useful for you, that's
it was just the gratitude of pain, because no one likes it, and to realize that part of being alive is to feel whatever comes up.
Yeah, is to feel it. I'm trying to remember the exercise I used when I was in pain, and maybe I've just taken away from my mind, because I'm sure Professor gave us one, and right now I can't bring it up, but I do remember those Supreme Yogas. I really know the Supreme Yoga.
Yeah, you do, and you can teach them really, really well. So let's just say we're coming up on Valentine's Day. So let's just have some fun with people who are either with a partner or would like to have a partner. And so let's start with the water element. What kind of partner would be best for someone with a water element? Let's say an average water element.
Yeah, I mean, water and water, always, the same element do well together. But so metal feeds water. So if you need someone who's going to help you, if you want that partner who's going to be the partner as a helper, then you might want that metal personality, someone who's organized and clear about things and tells you the truth and is very ethical. You might need that. But if you're a water person who gets bogged down and, in all your ideas and nothing ever happens, you might need a wood person. help you make it happen. If you sort of like this back and forth of water and fire, and both people are in balance, water and fire in balance give us life, right?
Right.
We have to have water and fire. And in balance, that can be a very dynamic relationship.
And opposites can attract too.
Yeah.
There could be a lot of attraction.
Yeah. Right.
What about water and earth?
Okay, so here's the thing about water and earth. Some people think that earth is just going to dam up the water, right? So it's going to be detrimental. But think about this. Think about the banks of a river, right? If you have these earthen banks of the river, that person can guide the water to the right place. So you have a really good guide if that earth and water are in balance. So it's like it's like people talk about wood and metal should never be together. And I go, wait a minute, stop. Don't take in everything you read in a book.
I love it.
Because wood is action, right?
Uh-huh.
Wood is action. And metal is right. It has a rightness about a righteousness about it that's really gracious.
Mm,
So when you put together righteousness and action, you get right action.
right.
We need a lot of that right now.
Yeah.
So these destructive cycles in all the books, and they say never do this and never do that. It's like you have to look at the yin and the yang. Feng Shui is all about energy, is all about the interaction of yin and yang. So you're looking at one side when you say metal and never would, and you're forgetting this other side. Also, if someone's really metal, really, really metal, and they marry a really strong wood person, this person can stand up and dull the edge of that metal, right? Without being hurt too much.
Yeah.
So
Excellent.
you there's some nuances here that I love sharing. I think that it's that nuance that professors showed us, that ability to be original in our thought, but to be grounded in the basics, and then be original in our thought, and to balance the yin and the yang, even in our explanation of things, because we tend to lean one way or the other.
Yeah. Well, what I'm hearing is that, like, let's say somebody is a metal person, and they see a wood person, they're like, well, I can never be with that person, even though I might be attracted to them. I can't, because we're, so what you're really saying is, like, balance that metal, and you could really be with anybody.
Yes,
What
I
you-
think someone in balance, and who's flexible,
Mhm.
um, can deal with anyone.
Well, if you look at all of the elements, we have water that can freeze, so that's not very flexible, right?
Yeah.
Wood can definitely, like an oak, can't really move. And fire is always kind of pretty flexible, I guess, but it can also be. How is fire not as flexible? If it's, I don't know. Wood, I know what. We'll go back to fire, because so earth can just be like encrusted and not able to move, right? You have to pick
Yeah.
it out, right? And then we know that metal, there's the two types of metal. There's like white metal, and then there's um, red metal. And red metal is when it's still hot enough that you can
Flexible.
flex
Yeah.
it and move it into something.
Mhm.
So yeah. So what would be inflexible about fire? Would it ever be inflexible?
Um, oh, that's a good question. I think I know. When someone gets so excited about something, like even in meditation, there's an expression of some sort that talks about the bliss of meditation. You can get stuck there, that high enlightened spot, and you can get stuck there. I think you can also get stuck in always wanting excitement,
Right. Right.
and
Right.
then you just get stuck there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we all
Wow.
get stuck.
You want to also have uh, a dating service, and match people up according to their faces. Like, these two faces would go together.
Yeah, I've been looking at faces so much, they're starting to all morph together. It's very interesting. I see a wood face, and the next day I can see the fire behind it, and
Mm,
it's been a couple weeks of this sort of new thing outside the circle, to see a face shape, and then to have it morph into different shapes that might tell me more about the person. It's been a new experience for me, I have
wow.
to say. Another step outside that
That's
circle.
because you're a seer.
Yeah, I guess.
You're a seer. Actually, I wonder if that's where the word seer comes from, just because a seer is someone who can see, something more than what's in that little circle. Um, Tell us about what you're doing now. You've redone your business a little bit, and with the pandemic, that everybody's changing things a little bit. But I noticed on your website you're offering you're offering things in a really different way. And I want to just say to people, if you've ever been interested in Feng Shui, now is the time to learn, because not only do you have all the information, but the way that you're presenting it is really making it so accessible to so many people.
Well, the thing I did this year was I changed my membership site into a 1-by-1. So there are 48 different case files. There's stories and how we worked through the stories, all the documentation behind them, all the, if I did X, Y, and Z, all the documents for X, Y, and Z are in that case file. It's how I worked through a problem and what I saw, and then there are case files on divination, and there's case files on the 5 elements. So there are 48, and it took my students 4 years to get through all those 48. But now I've made them available 1-by-1. So if you want to learn a lot of different divinations, you can go to that case file and purchase it. Or you can start from the beginning, because they do build on one another. So the first one, I think, is To Catch a Thief, and it's a story about finding out why a gentleman came to me and said, I think there's something going on with my money, and how we solved that. And the next one was called No Time for Sex, because the people came to me and their big problem was they had no time for sex. Well, that story unfolded into this amazing story by something that we just saw that I just saw on the floor plan. So those stories are there, and I think they're really fun. And all along the way, I teach you all the steps that you need to learn to get to the place to solve that mystery. So it's sort of mystery stories all throughout.
Yeah.
But I also have that full practitioner's library. I think there are 64 different audios, like the clutter audio is there, and that's on the Katherine Metz site. The storyboard 1-by-1 is on fengshuistoryboard.com. And so
one is www.katherinemetz.com, right?
yeah, that's the practitioner's library.
Katherine with a
Katherine.
RINE.
Yeah.
I'll put it down below. And that's so Katherine Metz, METZ.com, and
Yeah.
then Feng Shui Storyboard.
fengshuistoryboard.com. Yeah. So, and all those years, I mean, I've been doing this 38 years now, if you can believe, I can't even believe that. So everything I think I've learned is finally up and available. Yeah. And it's been, I have to be so grateful to Professor, because he's given us all of this. You know how gracious he was, and how giving he was. He never held back. We were just so lucky. You and I were really lucky.
We were really lucky, but I want to say you never held back either.
Yeah.
You're very gracious as a teacher, as a coach, as a mentor, and it was very hard. It still is sometimes when you ever give me a consultation, or I'm looking at my feng shui and what you see and what I see. Still really, I feel still very young in it, even though it's hard. I think it's very hard to see your own feng shui. I don't know if you're that way, but it's very hard to see it. But still looking at your floor plans. One thing that Katherine just talked about was how you can tell even an illness, what the relationship looks like, a lot of that by actually looking at a floor plan. And I have to tell you my one story about when I first started being interested in feng shui. This was about in 2000, because I think I met you in 2001. And actually I have a story about how I met you too. But I remember I was working at this, it was like a Whole Foods store, and we had a department. I was ordering some of the books, and there were some books on feng shui. And I remember I had broken up with my boyfriend, which was just horrific. I was just in the worst place. And I woke up that morning and I said, you need to go to the store. You need to go read this book on feng shui. And it was just like, that was the first thing in my mind. And so I went there, I got this book on feng shui, and it had at that time I had some really noisy neighbors on the side of me. And it was noisy in 5 different ways. First of all, one of their kids would play a boombox while he's playing basketball. They had 2 sons. They had like 3 of their sons, like older sons living, and they had these like hot rods. They were really, really loud. And this is like a small neighborhood, okay? We're like this far apart from each other. The couple were always yelling. They were a foreign couple and they were always screaming and yelling. And then they had like 2 or 3 dogs that would bark all the time. Not only that, there were crows every morning. Oh, like it would just be like, this is my bedroom window, So I put up a mirror like they told me to. I thought I'm just gonna try this one thing. I had nothing, I didn't even know how to put it up and set it or anything like that. I put up this mirror and then I forgot about it for like about a month. And I remember people in the neighborhood would ask me, like, how can you live next to that house? They're so noisy there. Within 3 months, I hadn't noticed it, but right away the crows like stopped crowing. The 2 boys moved out. The son ended up like going to the boys club rather than playing basketball there. And then I don't know what happened to the dogs, if they got rid of them, but there wasn't anything to fight about anymore. And it was just like, and I'm like, this feng shui stuff, this really works.
Yeah, I know.
Because I couldn't even pronounce it, I think I said feng shui, this feng shui stuff. So then I looked online, and now let's see. Somehow I found a teacher that was there was Boston Feng Shui, and we're the place that we were at. We were studying, and you came in as one of the guest teachers. And I remember we had a break, and I remember going down the stairs, and I got this, and I felt like, because I had never met Professor, but I'd heard about him, and I felt it was like from Professor that said, "You need to study with Katherine Metz." And I'm like, "What?" I'm like, I'm in this whole program, and then I called you up, and then I left that program, and I started working with you, and so it was just, but it was like all like, it just kind of came to me, and yeah, it was really intense to learn all of that, but totally changed my life, like
Yeah.
really, really changed everything, relationships, and you've helped me through a lot of different moves. And, because every time you move, you're going to be changing. It's like your body and your environment are the same thing. So it's like surgery, really, on the body. Do you want to talk about that at all? Because that's how I definitely experience it. Because there's you want to be safe with it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's yeah. I remember right before I spoke with the architect, the Italian architect, um, I put up a sun moon mirror to reclaim a missing wealth area in this house that I'm in now. Um, and I hadn't done it for a year. I knew I needed to do it. I hadn't done it for a year because I was just trying to get a sense of the place and take my time. And I was doing a lot of writing and stuff. But it's also the area of the hip, because I'm having a little trouble with my hip recently. And so I put it up there and I did my intention, and I said, I really would like to accumulate money that comes in and stays in the house, so it's there for my grandchildren. And I went through all of that, and I said, and it'd be nice if my hip is, starts to feel a little better. But so to have some money come in was one of the things. And I got on the call with the architect, and we worked this thing through, and her beautiful wooden fire just got it done. And then she said, and I want to hire you now. So I mean, just about 30 minutes before I had set this mirror, right? So it doesn't always happen that way, and I don't want to leave anyone with the impression that it always does. But something changes. Something changes in us. Something changes out there. The two come together, and it may take more time. It's a process, and I think that's really important for us to share, is that it's not magic, and it's just the interaction of yin and yang,
Yeah.
and intention of our heart that all come together at the same time, and something changes. And to really take note of the change, whether it's good or sometimes it's bad at first, because you have to see something in order for something to change. So there's a lot there to say about how this works, and it's nuanced, and it's beautiful, and it's meaningful, and it's insightful, and it allows us to pause for a moment and to think more deeply.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, you're talking about chi. I've gone back actually and looked at all the apartments that I've lived in and the homes that I've lived in, and what happened there, and it's just all there. It's like a book written, you know, from just looking at a floor plan for each of these places, and so it really, when I started to look into feng shui, it really allowed me to have, you said it's not magic, but it almost was like it gave me a different superpower that I didn't have before, because I would be like, what's going on? Like, why can't I seem to, like, why do I get so close and then I lose the job, or why is this happening? And then and then you have a feng shui consultant come in and look at your place, and it's like, is this happening? Is this happening? It's like, yes. Like, well, right?
Yeah, and that's when you know you have a good practitioner with you, when they can come in and ask you questions and that get you right to the point.
Yeah.
You know, instead of just saying, move this, move that, and that picture shouldn't be there and this shouldn't be there. If you've got that going on, it's probably not the best. I think what you're saying is that I hear you saying that your work is very much focused on asking the right question at the right time to the right person.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and that's a craft. And that's an art. That's an art and a craft. And I think it's just really important that you know, I acknowledge your mastery of that, because it's beautifully done. And I want to say thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's funny because when people come into my house, they're always like, wow, it feels so great here. And it's like, yeah, because I know how to do feng shui. And that would be the other thing I would encourage anyone to learn, just even the rudiments of feng shui is really, it can really change your life. Because I think it's really nice to have, just like it's nice to know your alphabet and your numbers. It's nice to know how to put a room together that's going to empower you, and it's going to bring you better luck, or that will give you, because like we've talked about, just moving a desk in a slight way can shift something in your life,
Yeah.
and make you even just happier and more successful. And if you're uncomfortable with where your bed is or where your desk is, that's going to affect your job, right? So all of
Yeah.
those things, yeah.
Yeah. So I highly recommend hiring Cindy for your feng shui.
Well, I
You know,
wasn't really making it for myself, but because I'm hiring you to come and do my feng shui. What I'm recommending is people go to your website and just check out a few of the classes there. Now that people can just really download one, and it would be better than going to a book. That's what I would say. Go there, because you'll find, especially some of the divination is can be very, very interesting. Do you want to talk about what divination is? Just at
yeah, divination to me is exploring the potential of the current moment. You know, seeing what's here right now in this moment that we're sitting together, we're asking a question and we're receiving an answer from out here, a divine answer. And it's not telling the future, it's not telling us past, it's allowing us to see what's available to us right now and what step we can take right now or not take right now in order to bring success. So it's the moment that we're in. It's not the future. It's not telling someone's fortune. Um, it's that moment together, and
it's looking at your chi, right? It's like really, it's reading your chi, because you're the one that's doing it, so to see.
yeah, it's two people coming together in a moment, and that moment is so powerful. It's so, and that's, and I find I can do it, on Skype and stuff, but when two people are together,
Oh,
that
it's so
spark is
different.
even stronger. So hopefully we will,
I hope
once
so.
again.
I hope so. I miss all of those Berkeley times that we had together in those silent
Yeah,
meditations. They were really very special years
those
too.
were great. And I miss Boston. Oh my gosh, I miss being there every year. Oh
I
my gosh,
know.
I miss the center there, the divinity school there. It's become a very special memory for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'll have to come out. You'll have to come out. You'll have to come to this new place in Vermont. Maybe you could do a workshop up there. That'd be fun.
That
That'd
would
be
be
really fun.
fun
Yeah,
for me. Yeah.
yeah. Well, listen, thank you. This has been, I'm just like soaking you in. And I would just say, if anyone ever could ever have a chance to have a workshop, especially live with this woman, oh my gosh, just like jump at it. This, one of the things I do experience about you is the balance of all the elements. And you do it so gracefully, so well. You are one of the best seers that I know. And I know that the professor would be just so pleased with everything that you've done. You know, I know his heart would be so proud and pleased with everything you've done. It's amazing. It's so amazing.
He's smiling down on all of us. You know,
Yeah,
we
yeah,
feel him right every day.
yeah. I have him like right behind me. And you know, this, yeah, like right, yeah. And it is, it's just, it's really nice to know. And every time I walk the red carpet, he's with me, and, you know, so
Yeah.
it's beautiful.
And congratulations on your book.
Oh, thank you.
Congratulations and so much good luck in this new year.
Oh, thank you. Same to you too. And I will be talking to you. This is so fun, and I just don't even want to let you go. But
I know, me too.
but I will, I will, and we'll be around. So I'm going to put Katherine's information down below, so that if you would like to reach her, if you have any questions for her, you'll be able to email her or go to her website and check it out.
Thank you,
All
Cindy.
right. Thank
Bless
you.
you.
Thank
Bless
you.
your
Yeah.
listeners. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye bye.